We had another Discord question, Evan, before we go over to Apple and Epic.
We do. I think it was asked before the fallout from this. It's a Dusk Golem question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure, go ahead.
It's basically stating that because he said that 4K games and all that were having problems running, he was just wondering if we can shed light on how he was claiming that they were having problems and the Xbox was going to be able to do it better.
I was confused about that situation anyway, because it almost felt like Dusk heard from someone in Capcom and kind of put it over the top, and then I guess they later said that they were concerned because the Xbox had more negative news, so they were like, the PS5 should have negative news too or something. I don't know. Microsoft has a lot of money. I don't think.
Can I ask a question about this though? Like did anybody think like the PS5 was going to be able to run like every single game native 4K? I didn't think that in the first place.
I don't think either. So, I think both systems are going to have a hard time with 4K 60 straight up across the board, because even Assassin's Creed is like, yeah, it's 30. And everyone was like, well, how can that be? I mean, we know what these third parties are going to do. They're going to say, look at all this extra space we have, or headroom we have. Let's push the visuals.
Sony never advertised.
It'll look good in a commercial. That's what matters. Yeah.
Sony never said, this is a super 4K system that's 4K for everything. They never said that, did they? I don't recall them advertising it.
Neither of them really have. Yeah.
I feel like they said it a tiny bit. Yeah,
they said it does 4K.
Yeah, you're right. But I feel like they definitely said like 4K, like this is a 4K gameplay technically because they upscale it or whatever. But
I just thought Microsoft went harder on the 4K. But yeah, I feel what you're saying, Jim Casca. You know, I mean, like, I never took it that way, so I didn't really see like the news in this.
Yeah.
Nate, what do you think about the Dusk Golem situation there? Because that got a little out there for some of the stuff that was being said, I guess, for like, what was it, Resident Evil 8, and then I think they were questioned by a developer, and it went off the rails there.
The problem is that the information, even if it were correct, it's not completed information. It can be from an outdated dev kit that hasn't had an updated development profile. We don't know the state of the game. We don't know what the information was actually originating from. It was foolish information to make public because we don't have the context of the information. So it was just kind of like, oh, I've heard a negative thing about the PlayStation 5 with Resident Evil 8. I'm going to make it public. But then when he was actually questioned on it further, he had no answer because as he put in Twitter, this is above my knowledge. I don't know all the technical stuff. So it's probably don't report or leak the technical stuff if you don't have the information to support it. And it was silly information put out there. And the developers who did push him asked him legitimate questions. Yeah. And, it's something that he can learn from the future of, if someone's saying right now the game isn't performing, well, that's the nature of development. The game by default isn't 4K 60 frames a second. You have to work to get to certain target goals for game performance.
Yeah, optimize it.
PlayStation 5 cannot do it. It's just at that point in time, it wasn't up to that yet. It doesn't mean it won't launch in that. So it was foolish information overall to actually make public.
And as Jeff mentioned, the PS5 goes about like how its GPU, CPU work with power differently than the Series X. So, I mean, developers have to account for that too. So they might be like, oh, let's bring this build over to the PS5. Oh, wait, it's not running how it's supposed to. And then they might have made offhand comment like, oh, this PS5 is just not, we got to work with it some so it works correctly. Things like that.
The tricks they know that aren't working, like that doesn't mean it's going to be an issue at launch. It could be, but even if it is, I don't think it's going to last very long. This is not going to be an issue that people are dealing with years from now. It's going to get figured out relatively quickly, if it's a problem at all.
We all have a chance to talk to developers, and something we hear sometimes is like sometimes games are just super low frame rate or whatever up until that like day one patch where they're like, no, we're trying to make sure everything is, I always say, feature complete. We're trying to make sure like your level up systems work and your save files don't delete themselves. Like we're trying to make sure everything works. So sometimes you'll have like sub 30 frames a second until literally launch. So it's like someone's saying we're having launch, we're having like frame issues now does not matter.
Max is right. I mean, not every shop will do that. Like you got like Turn 10, right? That they spend millions of dollars in research and development, making sure that their stuff is going to run at 60 from day one. But most of the time during development, everything is running at a poor level of performance. And then optimization is usually done at the end of the project or close to the end of the project to get it to an acceptable level. And Max is right. I mean, there's usually a day one patch that may come out that addresses those things. So, I mean, I agree with what Nate said. You can't really just take that information in a vacuum and make any sense of it, because we don't know, when that was, when that information was taken, and ultimately what level of performance the game is going to run at when it launches. I mean, it's not something that I really, and most developers don't really put too much stock into when they, when you hear things like that. So
we hear developers say that, the PS5 is really good. It works really well with everything. Then we hear some that are like, I like the Series X more. I guess it's just developer, just taste, or just how they've,
it depends on the company as well.
Experience.
Yeah, experience.
Yeah. Because it's experience, and I don't want to. I mean, we're going to talk about Epic in a minute here.
Yes,
but
we are.
Epic is also part of a marketing deal with Sony, so they're going to say PlayStation 5 is fantastic as often as they want because Sony's paid them to. Notice how Epic hasn't really talked about the Xbox Series X. It's not that they think the hardware is terrible; it's that they have been given a check to praise Sony. And some of these companies, you also typically see first-party developers are the ones coming out saying, "Oh, this hardware is awesome." Third-party developers very rarely are the ones on Twitter praising a hardware piece. So that also has to be taken into account, because it's a lot of vocal first-party Sony developers who are like, PS5's awesome. It's so much better than the PS4. Well, yeah, you work for Sony. Of course you're going to be praising the hardware you're working on for your next game. If you didn't, there'd be a lot of concern if the guy from Naughty Dog went on there and said, PS5 sucks. Right. Also probably get fired.
Oh yeah, yeah, that would be an interesting situation to see happen. Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the spec sheet, the Series X should do resolution and frame rate better, but I'm still curious about that SSD working into it with geometry engine.
For me, this is like the teraflop argument again.
Yeah.
It's just a meaningless statistic that has no bearing on the game when it actually launches.
Yep. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll have some stuff, Assassin's Creed, and some other things from third parties come out and I'm sure most people won't notice any drops in resolution or frame rate until it gets pointed out by Digital Foundry. So there we go.
Yeah, I think that's the exact right thing. Yeah.
Get the checkerboarding they're working on, apparently advanced upscaling techniques as well. Sony is. So we'll get to the point where native and I guess the quote unquote what manufactured or fake 4K is
fake 4K.
So difficult to tell. So yeah, it comes down to the games. We'll see what happens this holiday. So